Welcome to JWL Sports, where we review all the best sports clips from around the world. All right, we're watching a clip of Colin Cowherd, the Herd, talking about the Nuggets and the Timberwolves series. Now, I'm going to let this clip play. I haven't seen it yet, but based off the title, it looks like he's about to say that it's because the title says Nuggets are a mismatch for T-Wolves with 2-2 series. Now, okay, this is going to be really funny and interesting to hear what he has to say, because when the Timberwolves came out swinging those first two games, it was like game, set, match. Like everybody was saying over, including Colin. So I just really want to see how he's going to backtrack on this one. I mean, listen, I am all for changing your opinion. I talk about this all the time. I change my opinion. 1 minute I can watch a game and say, I'm going to make up teams here, you know, the Pacers are going to win the championship. And then I see them play 2 games against the Knicks and they get blown out. And I go, you know what? I actually don't think that anymore. And I think that's okay. Change your opinion. Anyone who just keeps the same opinion when you get new information, well, that's not what smart people do. So I'm always all for changing your opinion. But I'm really curious to see how he paints this picture, as if like he was always going to say this, or that he never said anything else. Like I'm really curious, because Colin does say things like, he, as you can see in the pause where it says where Colin was right and wrong on the Nuggets, like he does admit when he's right or wrong. But sometimes I still think that it's a little, you know, under the rug or carpet or whatever the heck the saying is, under the bed. And I was talking to a friend recently, and he explained to me, he's a real smart guy. He talked about just like the news and the media in general. He says it's really built upon people having no memory of whatever you said previously. Whether it's because you're catering to just new viewers all the time, so it doesn't matter what you say, or the fact that they're just counting on people watching more passively. So, for instance, Colin could say, the Timberwolves are going to win it all. This is amazing. And then a week later, he just says, no one could beat the Nuggets. They're the best team. And again, it's one of those things where even if you are a regular viewer, you have so much going on in your life, and you're not like, you know, sitting in front of the TV or the computer or wherever you're watching your phone, and you're not like locked in. And so then you just kind of forget kind of what he says, or anyone. And this isn't specific to Colin, to be very clear. This is what you see on all the news networks, you know, whether it be, you know, online, social media, wherever. And so I think that's really interesting. And it's something that I want to try to combat. You know, if I change my opinion, I want to really emphasize that I'm changing my opinion, or that I'm seeing new stuff, rather than just pretending this was my view all along. So, you know, it's not always easy to do, because you only have so much time when you're making a video and when you're posting stuff. So I'm really curious to see how Colin unpacks this. So sorry for the long open, but let's take a listen and we'll go from there.
This year was a great defensive team. Top of the league, great defensive team. And in the first 2 games in Denver, Nuggets, lethargic, were not ready for the physicality and the intensity and the relentlessness of the T-Wolves. The underdogs came in, threw a big punch, and knocked Denver down. But then they got 3 days off, full days, and they heard for 3 days from guys like us, people like us, how bad they are. They're cooked. They're terrible. And that stuff you always find out later. You know, coaches, you know, they edit up clips and they show the team in a reel over and over and over. Denver rebooted. They're the more talented offensive team, much more offensive skill. And, you know, between Joker and Gordon and Porter and Murray, all those guys could drop 30 on any night. They rebooted, and they turned a defensive series into a who's more skilled series, dusted themselves off, went to the corner, got a little advice, and the series now looks like a mismatch. It went from defensive intensity in the first 2 games to offensive skill. And outside of Ant, Minnesota really can't match up. They were not a great offensive team this year. Ant has become a great offensive player. Karl Anthony Towns, terrible yesterday, has been hit and miss in his career, though he's very gifted. But there was nothing inherently wrong with Denver when they were down 0-2. It just looked like they weren't ready to play and couldn't match up physically. The length of the T-Wolves, the aggressiveness, but they had the same coach. It's not an old roster falling apart. They didn't have any key injuries. They just weren't quite ready for the series. And again, it shows how valuable coaching is. You go back to that Warriors-Celtics final. After 3 games, the Warriors looked cooked. Okay, Steve Kerr, Heart of a champion, fly cross country, a lot of time together, make some tweaks, and from that point forward, Warriors go into Boston, win the game, win the series. It totally flipped the series. So Denver this year, 0-10 when they score under 100 points. So they just had to figure out, they may not be as good defensively as Minnesota. They had to get the offense right. They needed several days off, practice, film work. They're 0-10 when they score under 100. So they had...
Okay. I don't really agree with what he's saying, quite honestly, at all. Not to say that the Nuggets aren't going to come back and win this series. But this whole idea that the Nuggets just needed a couple days off, and now that there's suddenly a mismatch, or that they were somehow unprepared for the Timberwolves in those first two games. That's not the way how I'm watching this series. And I'm watching this series very closely. To me, this is the most interesting series of the entire playoffs right now, and just the most fun to watch, and probably will be most likely throughout the whole playoffs as a whole, most likely. At least that's what I'm thinking right now. But this is the way I see it. The Nuggets were coming off of a weaker team against the Lakers, without a doubt. Okay, their main players are older for the Lakers, and their younger players are inferior, both physically, just from the physicality, speed, strength, all of that, and just skill-wise. And so now when they go up against the Timberwolves, who their players are, for the most part, all in their prime, and their younger guys or prime players are also physically gifted. Again, not only when I say physically gifted, I mean like not only the ability to shoot, but also now to run and to be big and strong. Like Ant is an absolute animal, and it was just watching him play is exactly what I kind of said, why I kind of, tap the brakes a little bit on SGA, who I think is unbelievable and amazing. But this is what I said when SGA is small. A lot of people came to me and said, well, he's actually really tall. You don't realize it. And I'm like, yes, that's true. He is taller than he appears, but I mean small, not only in terms of height, but also in terms of body strength, how you play. Ant can muscle up, and that's what he's been doing. He can impose his will, not only on individual players, but a game as a whole that some of these smaller players, thinner players, don't have the ability to do. Even Steph Curry, who's one of my favorite players of all time, doesn't have that ability because of just his body size. And so that, to me, is what was probably the most jarring for the Nuggets, because and if memory serves me correctly, I can't really think of a team that they had faced outside of the Nuggets, or outside of the Timberwolves, of them seeing that. They faced a LeBron who's older now. That's different. They faced the Nuggets last year. I keep saying the Nuggets. The Timberwolves last season, but that was when they were even younger, when Ant was still kind of growing into himself in a lot of ways. And then when they face Miami Heat, it's like you're facing like a Jimmy Butler, who's a smaller player, again, relatively speaking, and as well as older now. So he's not in Jimmy Butler's not in his true, he's not 26 years old. I can just run all day. Let's go. And again, I'm not knocking Jimmy Butler. I love him as well. It's just different when you're facing, say, like a 22-year-old, 23, 24-year-old who is in the prime of their physical endurance and strength and can just run all day. And they're just big and strong. And I think, to me, that was probably the most jarring thing for the Nuggets, And so when you have that suffocating defense, it's also jarring because that's not how a lot of teams play in the NBA. So it was like they were shell-shocked in that moment, and they were able to do it for 2 games. And once a game kind of got out of control, especially the second game, it just continued to spiral, right? We saw, obviously, everything that happened with Jamal Murray, and it just became a disaster for them. And, basketball can be very similar to football, where once a team kind of jumps out and, you got the foot on the gas and your foot on their neck as well, it just can sometimes be very hard to come back. We've seen plenty of teams come back from down 20 and things of that nature. That can definitely happen. And also, just like in football, where once you come out, 2-3 touchdowns, once you get that lead, it can sometimes be just brutal, and then things just continue to just collapse. And I think that's what we kind of saw in a way in those earlier games. But there's a huge but here. I do not see the Nuggets as a mismatch. The Nuggets, the only mismatch that the Nuggets have over the Timberwolves is the calm, cool, and collectness, even though they did not show that in those first 2 games. But the idea of like, okay, whether it be from Jokic or Murray, who typically is not who he was in those other games. He's definitely a lot more composed. Or Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., like, they do know what it's like to win a championship. They do know what it's like to be in these crazy situations. They know what it's like to be 0-2 and now win 2 games on the road. Those things really matter. It's why we talk about how important it is for experience, for the, why youth, when you're too young in the NBA, that's why these 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds are not necessarily winning titles, that you do need to learn how to win. And right now the Timberwolves are in that process of learning how to win. And so that's where I see that mismatch. But make no mistake about it, we are also witnessing, and I talked to someone about this in the comment section, and it's a frustrating aspect of basketball. It really, really is. The Nuggets now are incredibly hot. Every single shot is going in. They were shooting like 60+%. Like, they're just knocking down everything. Gordon's hitting like every single 3. Again, he's shooting better than Steph Curry. Those things are not the norm. Those are not the average. So it's like, can the Nuggets sustain that? If they can, then I think that they will win the series. But if they come back down to baseline, then I think that that of course the Timberwolves can win this game. Because the Timberwolves winning those first 2 games wasn't predicated on the Nuggets being just completely cold and the Timberwolves being completely hot. The Nuggets were missing shots and being held because the Timberwolves were playing unbelievable defense. They were making it. There's a difference between shooting a low percentage and having the defense force you to shoot a low percentage. And so the Nuggets are just incredibly hot those last 2 games, just making every single shot. The perfect example was Murray hitting that buzzer beater. It's just like everything is falling for them. And so when you do that, your margin of error is gigantic, right? It's to the moon. The Timberwolves always had a smaller margin of error relative to the Nuggets because of kind of what Colin said in terms of offense and the weapons, how Gordon can drop randomly 30 points, Murray, Jokic, and the Timberwolves don't have that. The Timberwolves, you could see that game was really like Ant. And I'm watching this, I'm thinking Ant's going to have to drop like 50, 60 points if they're going to win because no one else can really get anything going. And I think that's also kind of a problem with the Timberwolves of not getting Rudy Gobert. I know Rudy Gobert is not known to be dropping these 50-point games here, but he's like, he's kind of doing nothing offensively. And it's like, if you can start to get him a little bit more easy buckets, it just changes the way how the Nuggets have to play defense. So I do think that this game is a fascinating series. It's not exactly how I thought it was going to unfold, quite honestly, especially after watching those first 2 games. I didn't think that there was going to be a sweep, quite honestly. That didn't really matter. I wasn't trying to predict that in any kind of way, but I was definitely impressed how the Nuggets came back. But I do think that the Nuggets were undeniably over the top hot, just everything going down. And that really explains, especially, at least last night's game, or whenever you're watching this, game 4, that's really where that came from. They were just making every single shot. And this is what I was trying to say, where I was talking to someone in the comment section, and I'll probably say this in another video when I do the first things first, in terms of someone being really hot and now another team being cold. Because now Cat is struggling. Basketball is really annoying because we can't explain why one day Steph Curry, the greatest shooter ever, goes 8 for 12 from 3, and then another game he goes 2 for 12, and you can't explain it. There's no explanation for it except for it's just the law of averages. It's just odds. It's just how it goes. These players can't make every single shot, but it's not like Steph suddenly can't see. It's not like Steph suddenly is just not as focused. It's not like Steph's mechanics are just completely off now. It's just he's not 100% perfect, as no one is. And that's what makes basketball pretty unique, similar to baseball, where football is not like that. Patrick Mahomes doesn't randomly lose the ability to throw accurately. Of course, he can have some games where he throws maybe a little bit, a couple more bad throws than normally, but he doesn't suddenly have his accuracy doesn't suddenly drop by 50% like it can in shooting. In basketball, he doesn't suddenly lose the ability to throw the ball 30 yards down the field. That doesn't happen to someone like a Patrick Mahomes, but it happens to a Steph Curry. And there's not other times where Patrick Mahomes now all of a sudden just throws the most perfect passes 100% of the time, no ifs, ands, or buts. But in basketball, a guy can go like 12 for 12, 10 for 10 or something and just make every single shot, not miss. And that you just don't see that. Football, Lamar Jackson doesn't suddenly lose a second for his speed, for when he runs on his 40 or wherever. That doesn't happen. But in basketball, right, the most important thing is being able to get the ball in the hoop, right? You have to be able to score. And that fluctuates so much in terms of, what is going on here. How many points, how many shots are going in. And to me, that's what can make basketball frustrating sometimes, because you're just like, they're just cold. And again, I watch these games over the years, and I'm just like, sometimes when the team that you're rooting for loses, or the other team, truly beats your other team because they're just so hot, like this game 4. And it's just like, whether you believe in God, the universe, whatever, it's just like, that was just the way it was going to go. They're making every single shot. This team is not. They didn't suddenly forget how to shoot, and it's not because of the great defense by the other team. And that's just basketball. And to me, that's what we watched, especially last night in game 4. That's just the way I see it. It's not to take away anything from the Nuggets. I'm not saying that the Nuggets got lucky and the Timberwolves got unlucky. To me, those first 2 games, the Timberwolves convincingly won. And I think the Nuggets convincingly won game 3, but this 4th game, to me, was just the powers that be, where it was just like, all right, the Nuggets are just going to make every single shot, and the Timberwolves are going to have a couple of their shots rim out. And that's the difference between winning and losing. Seriously, a couple shots get rimmed out for the Nuggets, a couple threes, and a couple threes drop for the Timberwolves, and boom, they're up 3-1. And so that's just the way how this series has unfolded. So to me, it's like, who's going to stay hot and who's not. So, but that's just the way I see it. I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this one. What do you think? Do you think that the Nuggets are just proving to be a mismatch with the Timberwolves? And do you think they'll come back to win this series? Or do you think the Timberwolves are still in control and can take it from the reigning champions? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of, and I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.